Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for Motivating Secondary Students in Mathematics. It's so nice to see so many math people on today, and so many of you that have attended other sessions so far during this Engage OK. So thank you for staying, and thank you for joining us in this last session today. My name is Christine Koerner. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the Executive Director of STEM Education for the Office of Curriculum Instruction at the Oklahoma State Department of Education, and I'm the former Director of Secondary Mathematics. But I am so excited because we finally officially get to introduce you to two of our new math directors today. And so first up, we have our new Director of Secondary Mathematics, Brigit Minden. So go ahead and introduce yourself, Brigit.
Hello, I'm so excited to be here. My name is Brigit Minden. I was born and raised in Oklahoma. I am Christine's new, or I guess old, position as Director of Secondary Mathematics. I have been living in Southwest Oklahoma for the last 20 years, and 10 of those years I have been teaching at Central High Public School. It is a K-12 school, PK-12 school between Lawton and Duncan, small rural school. And so this is a big step for me, and I'm excited to bring the rural small school voice to the State Department and learn about the bigger schools, how they are the same and different from the schools I grew up in and have taught in. And I'm very excited to continue the passionate work that Christine has started and just get to know you all. And I'm super excited to be here. Next, Anthony. You're muted.
I know it didn't want to come off mute, but I got it. I'm Anthony Purcell, and I am the new Director of High School and College Math Readiness. I most recently have been teaching in Stillwater. Before that, several places in Kansas. And one of the main things that I'll be working with here is the Math Core initiative that was announced yesterday during Superintendent Hoffmeister's opening keynote.
Thanks to you both. And we're just so excited again to have such a strong math team. We have Susan Kirk with us too, our Director of Elementary Mathematics. And so the three of them, plus our Oklahoma Excel math specialist, Gina Barnhill, they're just making an amazing math team to support all of you and support just our students in Oklahoma. And so I'm just very, very excited that they get to be with us today too. And so today we are focusing on a few different topics, and there will be opportunities for interactivity, for discussion, for sharing ideas in the chat and other spaces. And so we just want to remind you of our norms. Please try to stay engaged during this session. Although we wish we were in person, we still have the opportunity to connect virtually, which is great in other ways because we get to really connect with all of you from across the state all at once. So we love being able to do that, but we do know it's harder to stay engaged virtually than it is in person. Please share your ideas, share your experiences. Don't be afraid to speak up with your advice and your input and your planning and things that you're doing this year and in the past, because we want to hear from all of you, and your voices really shape our work and what we can do to both support and amplify your voices.
Thank you, Christine. Okay, so we're going to jump right in and we're going to start. I want to hear from you guys, classroom teachers. We're going to start with a Menti poll. Okay, so there's a QR code that you can either scan, or I believe Anthony's going to put the link in the chat. And if you're like me in a classroom, I like when students are discussing and when they're talking and when they're asking questions and they're engaged. But sometimes you just get those questions that drive you bananas. Like, you just kind of look at them and you're like, really? So I'm curious, what questions do you get from your students that just make you go bananas? And so I'm going to pull up, it's going to make a word cloud as you guys answer on Menti. And you can answer more than once. So if you have more than one question, I encourage you to put that on your responses. And hopefully, as you do that, they will start to appear. Maybe if I've done this right. Okay. Let's see. I'm not seeing anything yet. Okay, well, maybe it's not working.
Try pressing S to hide the image and see.
Oh, maybe.
Maybe.
Oh, there it is. Okay, my bad.
There we go.
There it is. Okay. I was like, why am I not seeing anything? There you go. I don't get it. When will I ever use this? Oh my goodness. Yes. Why do we have to do this? This is boring. Do I need a pencil? Like, why do you show up to class without a pencil? Like, what are you going to write it in your own blood? I mean, is this for a grade? Yes. So what I'm noticing is that you guys get a lot of the same questions that I got. They want to know, when will I ever use this? Why is this important for me to know? And I don't know about you, but a lot of times I get that kind of response because students feel like they're not good at math. They don't have that mindset that this is something they need. They're not good at it, so they don't want to try, or they don't give it that effort. So my next question for you is, then how do we get them thinking like that? Let's see, go back to my presentation. So in the chat, I would like for you to think about what percentage of math that your students learn is relevant to their lives. And also, what percentage of students do you think have had a negative math experience? Maybe not necessarily in your classroom, but perhaps earlier grades or different schools. And so if you would put those in the chat, we're curious to see what these percentages look like to you. What percent of math that the students learn is relevant, and what percent have had a bad math experience? And I'll give you a couple minutes to answer those so we can take a look at the answers and see what you guys are saying. Wow, 90% have had a bad experience, and 20 to 30% direct. Yeah. I'm loving these.
Loving and hating, right? Love it. Like, we're seeing some consistencies in the percentages and we are seeing some higher relevancy with the math, which is great to see.
Yeah.
But it makes me sad to see, the 95% for negative experiences and 75%. I haven't seen one much below 75 yet.
I'm excited. I really kind of expected the relevant math to be a little bit lower. I know my students always say, when am I ever going to use this? They don't see the relevance. So we want to think about how we can shift that thought of, I'm never going to use this, to what you guys are saying. You're seeing in your students, the 80, 90% say, yeah, this is stuff I'm going to need. This is relevant to my life. And we also have the idea that I'm not good at math. and we want to decrease that number. So what if we could shift the percentages? Some of you had very high percentages for relevance. We don't want to shift that, but we want to shift the experience that the students are having to a lower number. And we would also like to increase the amount of relevance that the students have in math, and they see that it is useful and helpful and something that they will use in their lives. So how do we do that? We're going to take a look at a few examples. And I don't know if you guys watched other sessions, but this morning, Tiffany Neal and Ashley Moore were talking about ways to differentiate in the classroom, and they brought up the frameworks. And so what we're going to do is we actually are going to look at some of the frameworks. I don't know if you guys have seen Unit 0 in the frameworks. It is embedded in every grade level, and it's lessons that are there to help you develop the mathematical mindset for students with lessons that are already built in, already prearranged. Everything is there. And all you have to do is just go find this lesson that interests you, that you think your students would find fascinating, and just enact everything that's there. I like to use it at the beginning of the year with my students. I know a lot of teachers find it difficult to spend a week at the beginning of school on not content related math. They want to jump right in and get started. But I promise, if you spend this time with your students, just, if you can't give up a whole week, maybe just a day or two to help develop this mindset in your students, then it pays off throughout the year. So I really think it's worth investing that time at the beginning of the year, and then again throughout the year, developing this mindset for students. So this activity I've pulled from the Algebra 1 Unit 0 frameworks. It's called 4-4s. And I don't know if you've ever done 4-4s before or not, but we're going to try it. So here are the rules. You are going to try to find every number as an answer from 1 to 20 using only 4-4s. And yes, you have to use all 4s every time. You can't just use 2, have to use 4-4s, but any operation can be used. So for example, quantity 4 divided by 4 plus 4 minus 4 equals 1. So again, in the chat, for those of you that are challenged and want to give it a try, some of the numbers are more challenging than others. So I'm curious to see what you guys can come up with for finding all of the numbers from 1 to 20.
And just so you know, I'm going to keep track of the 1 to 20. Let's see how many we can get.
Awesome.
Ooh. Ashley,
Another one. And that's what I love about this. Like, I showed an example to find number 1, but that's not the only way to find it. And so, it really encourages the students to think differently and think about numbers in a different way and use the order of operations to create all of these numbers. And it's also challenging enough that this could be used in middle school with just basic order of operations. They may not achieve every single number, but some of them, it will challenge them and they will work to try to find that number. And then it's also challenging enough for your high school students because they do have to think about how to get some of those numbers. And so it'll challenge them to think about their operations, to think about the numbers and how they can get those answers. Okay, Anthony, how many are we up to?
Well, we have to remember that we have to use all 4 4s. I'm seeing some answers that have only 2 of the 4s and some that only have 3 of the 4s. You have to use all 4 4s.
You have to use all 4 4s. So what I like to do at this activity with my students, I taught in multiple grade levels because, I was at a small school. So I would have each class have their own paper with the numbers on it. And I'd have them put at the top, 8th grade, 9th grade. And so when my freshman class got a number that my juniors didn't get, they were like, wait, how'd they get that? And so they were looking at other answers, trying to figure out, and then trying to find more ways, like, sophomores had more answers for 15 than any other class. So it developed a nice little competition between them as well. And I would leave it up for several days to encourage them, they'd go home and think about it, or not all of them, but they would think about it and spend time, trying to figure out those numbers. 1, 2, 8, 15, 16. Okay. Someone got 20. Chris got 20.
Amanda got 4.
9. If I remember right, I think 17 is the most difficult one to get.
Well, and you also have to be careful. One thing that I always caught with students was the order of operations, because we have a, Chris Rudy, you said 4 divided by 4 plus 4 times 4. I know exactly what you did. You went left to right, but order of operations says we've got to do that 4 times 4 before we add to that 1 that you had before. And so that's one thing. We just get stuck in that mindset of, oh, just going left to right, but that order of operations will throw us off.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Chris, you got it. Just add some parentheses and we got that covered.
And again, it gets them thinking about that. And if they struggle with order of operations, this is one way they may remember, oh yeah, I've got to use those parentheses because it completely changed what answer I got. So awesome. So I also wanted to show you, so you guys can keep answering if you want to, I want to show you what it looks like in the frameworks. So this is a sample lesson that I took from, again, the Algebra 1 framework. And you can see these are from the UCubed website. They have lessons on everything. And I really like to focus on growth mindset in the first week with my students. And there are activities you can use independently, you can use together as a whole lesson. And so this is an example. This one has a reflection and a survey that students can take. And then on the same lesson, so this is just a continuation. Okay, I don't know what's going on. There we go. There's an activity. Now, these videos, they're kind of cheesy. They're meant to be, and the kids will moan and groan when you show them. But I promise you, I had students quoting these throughout the year. They would, when we were struggling and they were having a difficult time, they'd say, oh, I think my brain is growing. And it kind of gives them that permission to embrace the struggle, but it has a purpose, and it's not just mindless struggle, that it's productive struggle. So this video that's in this particular lesson is wonderful. Also, I wanted to point out this lesson is the norms activity on this lesson is fantastic. I took a day out of each class. And again, I know it's hard to give up a day at the beginning of the year, but having the students create these norms themselves, I would leave them up on my wall well until Christmas, sometimes after Christmas, because as you're getting into the hard work, as they're starting to struggle, I could point them back to their own words of what they said they liked about, what do you like when you're working in a group? And when one kid would start to take over the conversation to be like, remember, you said you didn't like it when one student answered everything, or when someone answered too quickly and you didn't get a chance to think through the problem. So it allowed them to get their thoughts and their norms in their words that you just simply could point to and bring them back to what they were saying, that these were their norms they created for their class. And then there at the bottom, you can see the 4 4s that we did today. So this is just one lesson that you could, again, use each activity independently, use it all together in one class. And I just think it's really great, again, at the beginning of the year, to set that norm for your classroom, to set the culture and develop that relationship with the students. You can also do it, I know, like short weeks when you have like fall break or right before Christmas when you're not wanting to start new content. It's fantastic. It is math related, but it's not content related. So you get to grow their math minds without having to worry about catching up a lot of students, or if you have a lot of students absent, this is great because there's not a lot of catch up that you would have to do for students, but it still keeps them thinking and growing and using that mathematical mind. And so what I want to find out again, some extensions. So here are a few extensions that you could use. Again, upper grade levels could go beyond, and maybe even middle school. Maybe you have some really fantastic middle school students who are already on that mindset and are willing to be challenged. So does anybody have any other extensions? You could just share them in the chat. Anything that you could think of, or? So I'm curious, what is magic square? Anybody? Okay. Okay. Yes, Anthony, I also do these type of activities coming back from Christmas break, getting students back on track and back into school mode without having to overwhelm them. So let's continue on and let you guys kind of dive into the frameworks. So we're going to explore Unit 0. Some of you may be familiar with it. Some of you may have never seen it before. So Anthony's going to post the link to the frameworks in the chat. Go to your grade level. You can choose any grade level. And what I might challenge you to do is, if you teach high school, maybe look at an elementary one or middle school. Same way, if you're middle school, look at the high schools. See that there's the similarities there between them and maybe different ways that you could scaffold them. And also use them if you teach multiple grade levels, how you could use the same activity for all of your classes. So you'll select a grade level, go to the suggested learning progression link. And the very first thing you'll see is the Unit 0. And there's a reason it's called Unit 0. We like to use it to preface all of the other math that they're going to be learning. And so I want you to explore Unit 0, see if you can find something that you find very interesting, or maybe it's new to you. Maybe you've done Unit 0 before, but there's new activities or new ideas there that you didn't know were there. And then when you come back, we're going to take just a few minutes so you can explore, and then we'll have some reflection and get to your ideas. If you have difficulty finding it, just unmute and let us know, or put it in the chat and we can help you find the Unit 0. Does anybody have any questions so far?
Should we give about 5 minutes for exploration?
I'm sorry, Christina, can you hear you what?
About 5 minutes for exploration?
Yeah, that'd be great. This is where we need that cool music like Tiffany had. Okay, so welcome back. Hopefully you found something interesting and exciting. Does anybody have anything they'd like to share? You can just unmute and either share something you found, maybe a time you've used it in your classroom, advice for someone who may not fully buy into this yet.
Looks like Terry unmuted. Terry, are you wanting to share? Maybe not. That's okay. If you're not feeling up to unmuting and sharing out loud, if you are still willing to type in the chat your experiences or one thing that you saw or thought was interesting, we would love to hear it. Thanks, Brandy.
Something else we would like you to think about as you're exploring Unit 0 is how would this unit help create an environment that helps promote that mathematical mindset, that helps students think that math is relevant, that they can do math, that they are math people. So just things to think about. You know, this is not just time in the classroom. I mean, it's time well spent.
I was going to share, I always did the growth mindset, would always help the students with that growth mindset. And I just went and looked at 7th grade, which is what I taught. And guess what the Unit 0 is for 7th grade? Growth mindset. I was like, oh, I've been doing that. Didn't even know it was there.
Yeah, and I love that it's across grade levels too. Like the growth mindset, even if it's in 7th grade, you know, it's fantastic to use through all the grade levels. You know, just get them thinking in that way. Yeah.
Yep. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I just don't, you have to say it year after year. For some reason, they just don't want to, they need the reminder that yes, they can do this, but yes, they're math people too. Everybody's a math person, right? So
I just want to add to time is always, you know, our worst enemy in this. And sometimes it seems like, well, this is, you know, one more thing to include, and I already don't get to all my standards and objectives during the year. But what I would say to that is when I was teaching, I found that by setting up this environment at the beginning of the year, I no longer had to fight students to do work and participate in the work. And then, you know, monthly, I would bring in some of these Unit 0 activities and lessons and things, or approach my current standards in the instructional routines based on Unit 0 activities. And as Chris put in the chat, yeah, this does hit on quite a few of our standards and objectives, this work, and it engages students in a different way. And so by taking the time at the front end of things, I saved so much time on the back end with the fights and the resistance to engaging or trying or approaching different mathematics, because they had done it and they had tried and they had made mistakes, but it was okay. And so to that point, I just would say that take the time at the beginning of the year, see how it goes. Try out a lesson or two, see how your students respond if you haven't done this before. And you might be surprised by what you find out about your students and what they can do.
absolutely. That was something else that I had to learn to not prejudge my class. There were a couple of times I would look at the lesson and think, my students won't do this, but I'm going to try it. And they surprised me. You know, the ones that I struggled with engaging, you know, they'd come to math class and be just, you know, whatever, get through it. Some of them were the ones that really embraced it. And I guess maybe because it wasn't the typical math that they thought they would encounter, they were willing to try. And, you know, and that was a little bit of the buy-in that they're like, okay, well, if I can do this, maybe I can do the other stuff. So, and these are just a couple of quotes. I do believe that developing that mindset begins with the teacher. It says an important and powerful aspect of teachers' practice concerns the way in which they treat mistakes in the classroom. And I saw someone had put that in the chat, that mistakes are beautiful. So I'm curious if you guys would put in the chat, and you could answer these questions, number 1 and number 2, so we know your responses are in, or your answers are in response to these questions. How do you think students would like to have mistakes handled in the classroom? Maybe you already do this, but what advice would you give to teachers who are maybe hesitant to take this approach in their classroom? How do you think students want this handled? And number 2, what actions can you take to create a mathematical mindset? I think it's so important that teachers model that for their students and show them that mistakes are great. It happens. We're in the learning process too. And so, that you're growing as well. So. And then we also want to keep in mind that research has shown mistakes are important opportunities for learning and growth. Students see mistakes as them being bad at math instead of them growing. So how do we teach our students? How do we model to our students that this is the process, that mistakes are part of the growing, that mistakes are going to happen, and it's our approach and how we handle them? So what do students who have that mathematical mindset, how do they handle mistakes? And what does that look like for a teacher? So what are we doing, actions that we're doing in our classroom that help our students see that mistakes are okay? What are your reactions to these mistakes? And are you modeling this for your students?
Brigit, I want to point out one of the responses. It was
Sure.
a response to number 1, but it actually fits right there with number 3 and 4. It's Ashley's. She was saying that when a mistake happens, they highlight it, not to make the student feel dumb or low or not to be negative, but to highlight it. And they have a class discussion on what thinking was good and where to go with the mistake and how to correct it. So highlighting it and really discussing it, that's awesome, Ashley.
Yeah, often, you're like, I think if you act excited, like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you made that mistake. Let me, thank you for making that mistake, because you're probably not the only one that has made that mistake. But let's look at it and see what happened. Yeah, I agree that highlighting those mistakes is a great approach. I see a lot of the my favorite knows. That's always fantastic.
And if you don't know what my favorite no is, just Google my favorite no, and it will change your classroom.
We also have it in our instructional routines engagement strategies section of our OK Math frameworks. So if you haven't checked out all that the frameworks has to offer, be sure to check those out.
Again, frameworks, they're awesome. I love what you guys are sharing. I love that. It was a good point to ask the students what mistakes might someone else make. It gets them thinking about the mistakes other students might make. I have one more quote to share with you. Students and teachers should value mistakes and move from viewing them as learning failures to learning achievements. If we can just switch that thought process in students' minds that it's not a failure to make a mistake, it's a chance to do it again. And if we can get that mindset in our students, I think we really will see that shift in their engagement or their attitude in math. They'll see it as a more positive environment and not just another math class they have to get to. So I love that you're keeping the chat going, keep answering the questions. I do want to share, I love memes. And if you don't follow Howie Hua on Twitter, he makes fantastic math memes. And here we're trying to convince Patrick that yes, he is a math person. So it seems like just about the time you get them convinced, they think they're not again. So you got to convince me. And like somebody said earlier, you got to keep repeating it. You're a math person. You are a math person. Yes, still today, you are a math person. So now that we have students believing they're a math person and they're convinced, they've bought in, they are math people, how do we keep them engaged? How do we keep them doing the math that they find relevant? So we're going to do a quick little, I know I'm having you guys put a lot in the chat today, but I'm trying. You don't want to listen to me talk the whole time. So I want to see what you guys think. This is a quick would you rather. We want to know, would you rather A, replace a compact car with that gets 34 miles per gallon with a hybrid that gets 54 miles per gallon? Or would you rather replace a sport utility vehicle, an SUV, that gets 18 miles per gallon with a sedan that gets 28 miles per gallon? So you could quickly just, would you rather, which one do you think, A or B? Keeping in mind, what grade levels could you use this with? And does this make relevant math? Would the students find relevance in this? And I see a B. A, did anybody actually do the math, or did they just base it on?
By just choosing based on personal preference.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of students do the same, which I think is
like I don't want to drive an SUV. I'm going to choose A.
Yeah. And Terry says
comfort.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So then, so now that they're interested, which one? Maybe they do just answer based on comfort. I don't want to drive a hybrid. I'm going to drive something I'm comfortable in. So which one saves more gas? Which one saves more fuel? Now, I would argue that even though this is based off of a pre-algebra standard, would your Algebra 2 students, your juniors who are actually driving and buying their own gas maybe, find this relevant? Absolutely. And so even though it's maybe a middle school standard, this is something that gets them thinking about math, it gets them doing math, and it's relevant to them. So Brady doesn't want to have to charge her car. Okay, now I would also like to show you something else students would probably find relevance in. And again, in the chat, data. Okay, so based on this graph, what is something you notice? And I love the colors on this graph. So visually. The angles. Yeah, you could even use this in geometry, could you not? Is there anything you notice about this graph? I noticed that I'm surprised they even know what LinkedIn is. So of course, if you've done this as routine before, if there's a notice, there's a wonder. So not only did you notice, but you wonder what it looks like. What do you wonder about this graph? And yeah, what would an adult graph look like? That's very interesting. How would it compare to this? And that would be fantastic. comparison. Yeah, Catherine, according to my children, Facebook is for old people. No, no, not yet. So using this same graph, I like that it brings in data. A lot of times data is the unit that gets moved to the end of the year. Teachers don't have a lot of time to incorporate it, but this is something you could do, throw this up at the beginning of class or at the end of class and just start the discussion. You know, what do you notice about this? What do you wonder? Get the students, again, it's relevant to them. This is technology they interact with every day, all day. And so start that conversation. And how could you relate this to a pre-algebra student? What questions would you ask a pre-algebra student about this graph? How does this relate to pre-algebra students and their standards? If you think about the data standards in 8th grade in pre-algebra, how does this relate to that? You know, we're keeping the math relevant. This is something they would absolutely find interesting, but how do we relate it to our standards? Not only that, what questions could you ask an Algebra 2 student? Again, taking this across multiple grade levels. This is not something you have to specifically track down just for your class. You can use it across multiple grade levels. And so compare the snap streaks. So if you look at the actual standards, those snap streaks are serious, like they take them seriously. I looked the pre-algebra standard that applies here, describing the impact that inserting or deleting a data point has on the mean and median of the data set. So ask him, what is a data point that would impact this? And someone had mentioned it, you know, what about adults? This is teens. How would an adult affect this graph? You could also look at Algebra 2. Their standards ask them to evaluate in the data standard. The objective asks them to evaluate reports based on data published in the media. Again, getting them looking at data that's relevant to them while quickly, you know, getting to this part, to this unit that sometimes gets missed. And it's a great way to introduce the topic and that you can come back later and dive deeper. You know, that you're getting that introduction, you're getting them exposed, and then you can come back and bring it back to the actual math that you could do with it instead of just the observation. Once you've got them invested in the problem, you know, then you get to dive in and do the actual math behind it and see what happens to the graph and, you know, what is caused when you start putting all of these other data points in. So we want to know, how else do we make math relevant for students? If you have any suggestions that you think would make math relevant to students, you could just drop it in the chat. But I'm actually going to transition this over for Christine, and she's going to continue talking about ways that we make math relevant for students.
Yeah, I would love to have your answers to this question in the chat, thinking about, you know, both within the classroom and outside of it. How do we keep making math relevant to our students? And so I'm going to pause while you get a chance to add your thoughts. Okay, so we have bargain shopping. I'm all about goodwill and finding the best deal. And I love, you know, Kohl's always has those 65% off sales and things like that. We talk about, is that really a great deal? We bring what interests them into the conversation, absolutely. And sometimes that takes, you know, asking our students what they're interested in and pulling math that relates. And yeah, jobs, connecting it to their future careers or career interests or interests that they have, and then connect that to careers that are out there. doing football game, adding and subtracting with integers. I know that always captivated my students for sure. Gain and loss of yardage. Having recipes, cooking day. And
they will do anything for food.
Yes, absolutely anything for food. That is for sure.
So will teachers.
Yes. We've got athletic stats, absolutely. I feel like data is, a really quick, easy way to bring in relevance to our students' lives for sure. But also if we're having, them create the stories for their story problems, or we're having them create a situation that they want to solve, a problem that they want to solve, that can work too. Bring in professionals to show how they use math in their everyday lives. Magic tricks. I always like using math magic. That's always fun for me. So math magic is key. Yeah, so connecting, getting them excited, interested. We see a lot of things that seem to be engaging them. And so I also want to shift, and if we could go to the next slide, there we go. I want you to just think about, what is the actual math that every student needs? We've described some things that make it relevant. So what is the actual math that every student needs? And at the same point, what is the math that students would choose to learn? So thinking about those two answers, and you don't have to put this in the chat just yet, but thinking about those two questions, thinking about how you would answer those two questions, are your answers the same? Or are your answers different? And if your answers are the same, is that important? Should they be the same? Should they be different? That's kind of what we'll explore a little bit. And then I'm going to ask you some similar questions after we go through some opportunities. So keep thinking about, what is the math that every student needs? What math would students choose? How can those answers be the same or different? And what do we want to happen? And so right now, what I'd like to transition into, we've talked about within the classroom, how we can make mathematics relevant within our instruction and within the curriculum and types of problems that we use. And so we're taking it a step back rather, and we're really looking a little bit more at the course progressions for students and the opportunities there. We'll also be looking at some instructional materials opportunities and things along those lines. But first, we have our currently recommended high school math progression. This is the pathway that the majority of our students choose to embark on. And so that gives us Algebra 1, followed by Geometry, and then Algebra 2. Now, some students may struggle with Algebra 1, and so we have a few opportunities for those students. Right now, we are encouraging students who struggle with pre-algebra, and we anticipate they'll also struggle with Algebra 1, to take what's called Ready for High School Math. And this course is from the Southern Regional Education Board. It is a free curriculum that really supports students in developing the skills that they need in order to be high school ready. And so they're ready to come in and tackle algebra and tackle the work of geometry and Algebra 2 because they have reinforced those middle and elementary math skills that so often they lose or forget about as they progress along the grade levels. And so we ask that this be taken as a co-requisite class meaning it's during their Algebra 1 time or as an extra bonus lab class, but that it's not just simply repeating the same exact material that they're getting in their traditional course. It's taking place alongside it, and it's helping support them in that accelerated learning type of way where it's just-in-time support and it directly applies to what they're learning in their Algebra 1 classes. And then they can move into geometry. I know some schools flip Algebra 2 and geometry as well. And so we are really taking a look at the first 3 years, just overall, holistically. But some students, again, if they take geometry and struggle with algebra and geometry, they can enter into an intermediate algebra class as an alternative to Algebra 2. And then we recommend that they take Algebra 2 their senior year in 12th grade so that, again, they still have all of their pathway opportunities versus being restricted into one diploma pathway or the other. And so on the next slide, we talk about they've taken Algebra 2 and now what? And so we have been trying, and Chris, you just asked about the readiness and intermediate algebra. So intermediate algebra currently counts towards our core diploma pathway. And so students would receive math credit for the core diploma pathway, but for the college preparatory pathway, it does not count as a math credit. It counts as an elective credit. The Ready for High School co-requisite counts as a elective credit, regardless of which high school diploma pathway students choose. And that's because it's a repetition of current standards that they've already been exposed to. It's just presented in a different way to help students connect the dots between that prior learning and their current algebra class. And so, but whereas intermediate algebra provides a little bit of a bridge between Algebra 1 and Algebra 2, but it has some level of repetition. And so we count that for our core diploma pathway, but not our college preparatory pathway. And so when students get into Algebra 2, that one does count towards either pathway. And so that's why we encourage students to take that course right now as keeping their options open. But then if they've taken it their junior year, they have 3 different pathways currently that they can enter into for their 4th year mathematics option. And so right now we have statistics and probability, and that includes AP. They have college career math ready as an option, which serves as a math elective again. And then they have a pre-calculus trigonometry option. Now, I will say that college career math ready, that's for any student who decides, you know, I need a little bit of extra math support before I embark on what's next. And so it is a integrated math approach with Algebra 1, geometry, Algebra 2, and middle school standards and objectives that are all mixed together and bundled together in a way that really supports collaboration and application of the mathematics. And so then students have been shown, we did an Oklahoma study, to improve their ACT composite scores just from having taken that class. I know Brigit taught that class multiple years, and I know there are a few others on this Zoom right now who have also taught that class. But the typical gains of ACT scores were 2 to 3 points overall, just from having taken that class. And so we really recommend it for any students who just need a little boost or pick me up with their mathematics. That also works for any career, any student. It prepares them for any of our college level pathways. And it also prepares for any career or military choice that is going to involve any kind of math. And so we recommend that for students who are undecided. We recommend it for students who aren't sure whether they are going to college or not. We do recommend it for, you know, a wide variety of students. And so, and then for statistics, our statistics and probability course again, can be taken as an AP course, or some schools just offer it as statistics and probability. Either way works. And so we would recommend that for students who, again, are undecided, or they know they are not going into what's traditionally deemed as a STEM career, so science, technology, engineering, mathematics. Now, if they decide later to switch into that STEM, they will not be negatively impacted by taking statistics in high school. They just might have to do a little pivot when they get to college. And so we encourage that course as well. And then also there's the pre-calculus route and trigonometry. And that's typically reserved for students who know they want to go into a STEM career pathway and want to take eventually AP Calculus or the calculus sequence. Now, if you'll notice, for grade 13 or their first year of college, we currently have 4 different entry-level options for students in their first year of college. And this has been developed by the Oklahoma State Regents for Higher Education in collaboration with OSDE and high school and college teachers. And so we have different options: quantitative reasoning, elementary statistics, functions and modeling, and pre-calculus that students can go into. Originally, pre-calculus was called college algebra by schools, but the majority of them are switching and calling it pre-calculus because they feel like the equivalent skills are there. And so really, again, as if students decide that they want to take statistics in 12th grade, they can then enter pre-calculus their freshman year, and they won't have, as many issues necessarily, because they will be learning it for the first time, just like a whole lot of other people. And so that's okay. We also have those entry-level pathways feeding into a variety of other areas, depending on students' interests and major. And so right now we have these pathways, but there's always opportunities for additional pathways and additional ideas and additional thoughts. And so please be thinking about, what would you add, or what would your students add to this, keeping in mind student choice, student relevance, and what students would want to do.
Christine, there was a question, and Terry, I don't know if she actually did answer your question, but she was asking if a student takes a non-college ready pathway, then they graduate, but then decide to go to college, how does that affect them?
So sometimes it requires them to take some summer courses. It really depends on the college in question, which for their admissions requirements. Sometimes it requires them taking what are called remedial college courses. And so there's 0 credit hours that will support the mathematics in question and get them back on the pathway of what they need for college graduation. It really does depend on the college, but that is why we recommend students take, the math that they need to be on the college prep diploma pathway if they're not sure and if they think maybe it's an option, so that they can then work with that. And so, and Chris, for the ACT score in math, are you asking about the remedial math courses? Yeah, okay, so sometimes, and again, it depends on each college and its local control at the college level as well. So each of them have slightly different requirements. So some colleges, if your ACT score is low, they will put you in those 0 credit hour math courses. Some of them, like I know Seminole State and some others, are putting those students in a college level co-requisite class. So they're giving them on credit math coursework, but then they're providing an extra lab of support. That's really a small class, really providing one-on-one support and getting students back to where they need. And then more recently, several colleges have actually applied to be a part of a pilot where they're actually not considering ACT scores at all in the decisions for placements for their mathematics. And so they're using things like portfolio work from students, essays, GPA, class rank, things along those lines to determine what students can do or will do when they come into college versus their ACT score. And I'm not quite sure what you mean about alternative math for that question. We encourage our special education to still be a part of our traditional math coursework whenever possible. And so I'm not quite sure about the alternative math that you mean. In the previous slide, so are you talking about the intermediate algebra and the ready for high school math?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, those are in, yes.
Okay. Oh, so the ready for high school math, they can't just take the ready for high school math, but I would encourage them to take it as a prerequisite with the Algebra 1. And that, I think, is a great way to keep students focused and experiencing grade level content without them playing catch up the whole time. And so that's what I would recommend for our special education.
Do they take them as electives or they just take them as a prerequisite before the Algebra 1, Algebra 2?
They would take Algebra 1 as the math credit and they would take the Ready for High School as an elective. Yes.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. And then, yes, they do, students do need to have a letter on file from their parents acknowledging that they're planning on taking the core diploma pathway. That is in legislation. All districts are not currently required to teach the Ready for Math course. That is a local control. We do have a couple of trainings coming up this summer if you're interested in either the Ready for High School Math or the College Career Math Ready courses. And, you know, we would, just like Anthony put in the chat, we would love for every district and school to offer that. We also acknowledge that there are districts where you are the math teacher. I know Brigit was in one of those districts, and I know a couple of you on here are as well. And in that case, we encourage you to take a look at that Ready for High School curriculum and see if you can use it as a replacement unit or as a differentiation technique within your regular classroom, because those do get students engaged and interested in applying the math that they learn. And yes, intermediate math certification does allow you to teach the Ready for High School Math course and the College Career Math Ready course, both of them. Yeah, I'm happy to answer questions. That's what we're here for, so no problem. All right, so Brigit, go ahead and move to the next slide. Yeah, I wanted to highlight, and I've already gotten to highlight the Ready for High School Math training and the College Career Math Ready training, so I'm super excited I got a chance to do that already. But we have a lot of opportunities at the State Department right now to help support student choice, student relevance, and just overall high quality instruction for our students in mathematics. And so right now we have several initiatives going on, including Bootstrap, Algebra and Data Science, College Career Math Ready, Open Up Resources, Ready for High School Math, the Oklahoma Excel program, OSDE Connect, Ready Together Oklahoma, and last but certainly not least, our Oklahoma Academic Standards for Mathematics Standards Review and Revision process. And so first up, I wanted to just talk briefly about several high quality instructional materials, all free and available online to anyone who wants them. And the first one is the Open Up Resources. This is specifically for 6th through 8th grade students right now, but they are launching free open resources for the fall for Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2 as well. This is really high quality instructional material. It's top rated by EdReports, a national reviewer of curriculum. And right now we do have lessons already included in our Oklahoma math frameworks from Open Up resources. If you go to the grade level, just like what we did before for Unit 0, click on the suggested learning progression, and then click on Units 1 through however many there are for your grade level, you'll see those Open Up resources lessons in 6th through 8th. We also have our Ready for High School Math and College Career Math Ready curriculum, which I mentioned a little bit earlier. If you decide that College Career Math Ready, which is a 4th year math elective at the high school level, is a class that you'd like to bring to your school, teachers do need to be trained in order to teach that class. And so we have a training coming up in July, July 21st through 23rd to be exact, that would enable you to teach that course. And even if you aren't able to get it on the schedule for this fall, you can get trained now and then bring it and advocate for it for the following year. And so we highly recommend you join us for that. It is a free training, free open educational curriculum and resource. And if you have any questions about that, please let me know. We also have our Bootstrap computer science and algebra curriculum. And so this is really where we get into the student choice and interest and relevance aspect too, because we're now bringing in computer science, which a lot of times isn't available to our students until high school. We're bringing it in at the middle school level and bringing our Bootstrap algebra curriculum directly aligned to our Oklahoma academic standards for Pre-Algebra and Algebra 1. And then we're also bringing in data science, which works for really grades 5 through 12 with our standards and competencies. And so we have upcoming workshops available for both data science and algebra that will be included in some links that we'll share with you later. And then on the next slide, I wanted to highlight our standards review and revision. And so, and I know I see a couple questions in the chat and I'll definitely answer those. I don't know, Anthony, do you think I should answer them now or do you think I should wait until after we highlight all of our opportunities?
I'm actually able to get them.
Okay.
If you want to continue talking, and I can answer those questions for them. If there's any that I can't or I feel you need to get into, then I can pull them up later.
All right, great. So standards review and revision has already begun for our mathematics standards. By law, we are required to review our standards every 6 years. And so we are at that point, believe it or not, already to review our standards once again. We've selected all Oklahoma educators for our writing and draft review teams. And our writing teams have already met several times. And our draft review team is going to have their first meeting next Tuesday. And so during that process, our writing team will review each and every standard and objective for every single grade level. And then they will provide their suggestions for any revisions, changes, deletions, additions, anything that they feel needs to be changed based on research and based on current trends in mathematics. And then that will be sent to our draft review team, who will review those suggested changes and offer their feedback in return. After that process goes back and forth for a while and we have some sort of draft, we're going to then take that and share it publicly. So be on the lookout in October for an opportunity for public comment where you'll be able to review our standards, proposed changes and shifts, and you'll be able to provide feedback. Now, if you have ideas or things that you know in your heart should be changed or added or kept, please feel free to email any one of us on the math team, and we will take your suggestions and bring them to our writing and draft review teams as well. because we really believe that this process is shaped by you all who have been in the field, who have tried out these standards, who have been teaching these standards for many years, many of you. And so please submit your feedback and your thoughts to us. And then, all right, so I've shared a whole lot of our opportunities, but I'm coming back again to the idea of what does every student need in terms of mathematics? What math would students choose? And how can we make efforts to support students' interests? And so I'd love for you to choose one, two, or all of those questions to answer in the chat. I'll give you a few minutes and go ahead and type 1 in your response, or 2 in your response, or all 3 in your response. And I'd love to hear your thoughts at this point. Thanks, Chris, for kicking it off. It looks like you just described our mathematical actions and processes to a T. And Stephanie, absolutely. Without students feeling cared about, it's very difficult to move into any actual mathematics. Love that, Carrie. Connect with their life experiences. And I'm seeing problem solving pop up quite a bit. And yes, Pamela, when you believe you can do math, you can do math. Oh, and Chris, incorporating the technology, yeah, I think especially after this year, we saw, some really creative approaches to mathematics using technology. And hopefully we can maintain some of that as we continue forward, whether we're in person or not. And I know I shared some of our pathways that we currently offer, and I asked you to think about those pathways and think about what's missing. And just to really emphasize what you all have already described in the chat, our pathways and our math options for our students should really be based on our students and what they would choose, and our students' choices, our students' interests, and not what we perceive to be their interests. A lot of times, that gets lost in translation, where we think we know what students need, or we think we know what students want. But really, they need to be the drivers of these decisions and at the heart of any conversation about expanding courses, adding options, adding interesting mathematics, things along those lines. We want to make sure that they have a voice and they have a say. I love seeing the additional questions coming in. And Stephanie, definitely join our OK Math Facebook group. There's also an OK Sped Facebook group, and that would be an excellent support area for you to ask questions, get some answers. And then, yeah, number sense, just going back to our basics, like we need to have that strong foundation in number sense. Choose math that they can feel comfortable with, and we can help them become more comfortable too, for sure. Hands-on projects. Oh, and thanks, Terry, for connecting. All right. And so I wanted to highlight especially one opportunity for bringing in this relevance within your own classrooms. And I know we have a couple people who participated in the Oklahoma Excel program last year in the math cohort. So I would love for you to type in the chat, you know, your experience with Oklahoma Excel. But Oklahoma Excel is a year-round professional learning opportunity that is free. Districts do pay, you know, substitute costs and things along those lines, but the actual training and professional learning is entirely free. And it's where small groups of teachers focus on a single change idea that really can help support their students and make a difference in their math learning. And so this year they are focusing on addressing any unfinished learning, but it's also just helping students wherever they are at make some learning leaps and really just help empower them and help them feel confident and help them feel ready to engage and reason with mathematics. And so even if you are a solo teacher, you can still apply for the Oklahoma Excel program, and we can put you together with another solo artist teacher or set of solo artists and work together on that. And Pamela, thank you so much for sharing your experience with Oklahoma Excel. And really every group that we've had has wanted to come back and be with us again for another year. And so our math specialist, Gina Barnhill, is absolutely incredible in leading the work and helping to facilitate the conversations and data review and everything else that that group does. But if you want just a meaningful, really impactful professional learning experience, we encourage you to apply for Oklahoma Excel. The deadline's been extended to July 2nd, so make sure you participate. And then one additional professional learning resource that I wanted to share is the Ready Together Oklahoma initiative. This is a new initiative that just launched, and it's going to be part of a 3-year ongoing opportunity for educators, schools, districts, administrators, community members to all come together and learn and grow and share ideas and opportunities. And so right now, if you go to readytogether.sde.ok.gov, you will see a series of guidance documents that are in 5 different categories: student learning and success, prioritizing health and well-being, ensuring equity for all, engaging families and communities, and supporting teachers and leaders. And those 5 categories have guidance documents that revolve around different questions that we've been asked by our educator community. And so really having that guidance and support, it's research-based. So if you or someone you know is looking to spend your ESSER funds, those funds need to be spent on research-based practices. We've done the research for you. And so you can look at those guidance documents and see the research that supports the strategies that we offer. And so there is one currently on accelerated learning, which is a topic that we covered in past Engage OK sessions. And then there will be a math one coming soon. And so now we have one final activity for you to do. And this is actually going to use an interactive document. And Anthony, I don't think the link's posted with those. Sorry.
I know. I don't know why it's not working.
It's okay. No worries. So we just ask, once those links get posted, if your last name begins with A through M, you're going to click on the link that Anthony just posted. If your last name begins with N through Z, you're going to click on the next link that Anthony's going to share. And we just have a series of reflection questions to ask you that we hope you'll take a few moments and respond to in the Google document. And then at the end, there is a volunteer survey also included in the chat. And if you would like to be a part of future Oklahoma math education initiatives, please complete that link. There's a variety of ways to be involved, and we're always looking for new faces in addition to our amazing people who already support and volunteer to do a lot of work. And so please consider filling that out as well. But we'll give you a few moments to reflect.
Yeah, I think the link issue is with Zoom.
Thank you for those of you already beginning to enter in your ideas and your responses. And as you're continuing to reflect, we just want to highlight that there are additional resources for ongoing support and learning. And that includes a few links that we will be sharing in an interactive document in just a moment. But we have what's called our OK Math Toolkit, which really that's the place to start. If you're looking for some support, if you're a first-year teacher, or even if you're a veteran teacher, this lists the majority of our options and resources available to you. And then we also feature ongoing updates to our Oklahoma Math website. And so you can see a lot of ongoing professional learning, synchronous and asynchronous professional learning opportunities, as well as other resources, organizations, ways to get connected, and more. We also included a link to our OK Math framework, and again, a link to our professional learning opportunities, because we have a lot of them this summer, but we also will have a lot during the year. And so make sure to stay checking our OSDE Math website and our professional learning page specifically. And Brigit is going to be hosting a follow-up meeting to this Engage OK meetings, because we know that a lot of information was shared today, and yet not everything can be shared in an hour and a half. And so Brigit's going to be hosting a follow-up meeting August 11th at 4 o'clock. And so there's going to be a link to join and register to attend that meeting so that you can be a part of it. And then we also have a link to all of our slides so that you can go back and review and see the links to the different activities in the slides themselves. We also have a monthly math newsletter, both elementary and secondary. So please sign up for our newsletters so that you can get, again, the latest updates on what's happening in OK Math and all different kinds of professional development opportunities, but we also try to feature teacher spotlights and what teachers are doing across Oklahoma and some cool ways that you can incorporate student choice and relevance. And then we have our Twitter handles on there. We have our virtual professional learning communities that I mentioned earlier. So please join us and stay connected. And so again, we have our emails there. We are approaching 2:30. Actually, we hit 2:30. So thank you all so much for joining us. We really, really appreciate you taking the time this afternoon. We know it's right after lunch and the sun finally came out in OKC area. And so we just appreciate you spending a little bit of your day with us. And please stay connected, stay in touch, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
Chris, the PD certificate is actually found in that interactive document that Anthony posted, the very last one. So we can post it one more time.
And the PD, yeah, and the PD certificate is at the bottom of that link. So I will get that link back in there again.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And it will force you to make a copy, but then that copy is your very own. So you can have it forever. And thank you all so much.